Deep in the remote wilderness of Blackridge Forest, Park Ranger Maya Collins discovered an emaciated military canine German Shepherd protecting two newborn puppies in the midst of a brutal winter storm. What began as a simple rescue would unravel. A conspiracy reaching into the highest levels of military operations, expose an illegal training facility, and heal wounds that 3 years of isolation couldn't mend. This is the story of second chances, for a damaged dog, for vulnerable puppies, and for a ranger who had given up on human connection after devastating loss. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The biting winds of Blackridge Forest swept through the ancient pines like invisible blades, carrying ice crystals that stung any exposed skin. Snow had been falling relentlessly for 3 days, blanketing the wilderness in 2 feet of pristine white that concealed the dangers beneath. Inside the isolated ranger station, positioned at the eastern boundary of the national forest, Maya Collins sat with her back to the fireplace, its warmth barely penetrating the perpetual chill that had settled in her bones years ago. 3 years had passed since the rockslide incident that claimed 7 lives on her watch, an accident that the official investigation had ruled unavoidable due to unprecedented rainfall and geological factors beyond human prediction. The review board had cleared her name, but Maya had never cleared her conscience. As lead ranger, she had approved the hiking permits that day despite meteorological warnings. She had been the one to radio the all-clear just hours before millions of tons of rock and earth crashed onto Trail 22, burying hikers, including a school photography group with 5 teenagers and 2 teachers. She had been the one to discover the first backpack protruding from the rubble. Following the incident, Maya had requested transfer to the most remote outpost in the national park system. Blackridge Station was perfect, accessible only by a treacherous 7-mile fire road in summer, completely isolated by snow for nearly 5 months of winter, and staffed by a single ranger. Here, Maya's only responsibilities were wildlife monitoring, weather reporting, and occasional rescue operations for the rare, foolhardy hikers who ventured too far into the wilderness during shoulder seasons. The cabin walls had once displayed her achievements, photographs from international conservation projects, her master's degree in environmental science, commendations from 3 park directors. Now they hung barren except for a single topographical map of the surrounding 60 miles of wilderness and the emergency protocols she had memorized within her first week. Maya preferred it this way. Achievements implied capability, and capability suggested responsibility, something she had forsworn after 7 body bags had been airlifted from a site under her jurisdiction. Tonight marked the peak of the season's first major storm system. The wind howled against the reinforced windows, searching for entry points with persistent fingers of cold. Maya's radio crackled with the hourly check-in from Central Dispatch, the only human voice she had heard in 11 days. Blackridge Station. This is Central. Storm intensity increasing beyond projections, wind speeds approaching 55 mph with gusts to 70. Temperature dropping to -20 with wind chill. Confirm status, over. Maya reached for the radio, her voice rough from disuse. Central, Blackridge confirming. Station secure. Emergency protocols in place. No idiots on the mountain tonight. Over. Roger that, Blackridge. Next check-in at 2300 unless conditions deteriorate. Stay warm. Central out. Maya placed the radio back in its charger and glanced at the wall thermometer. The external temperature had indeed dropped another 3 degrees in the past hour. She added another log to the fire, watching as sparks spiraled up the chimney like desperate stars fleeing back to the sky. The Weather Service predicted another 48 hours of storm conditions before the system moved eastward. She had prepared accordingly, extra firewood stacked by the hearth, emergency rations organized, satellite communications equipment tested and functional. The rangers who had previously staffed Blackridge spoke of winter isolation as the greatest challenge of the posting. Maya found it the only tolerable season. In summer, hikers occasionally reached her station seeking directions or assistance, forcing unwanted human interaction. Winter brought blessed solitude, interrupted only by radio check-ins and the monthly supply helicopter when weather permitted. December through April, she could almost forget. She belonged to the same species as those whose deaths weighed on her conscience. Maya checked her watch. 9:17 p.m. She would conduct a final perimeter check before turning in for the night. Standard procedure during extreme weather conditions. She pulled on insulated coveralls over her uniform, added a thermal layer beneath her regulation parka, and completed her preparations with heavy-duty gloves, a radio, and the powerful weatherproof flashlight that served as her constant companion. During darkness, the moment she opened the reinforced door, the full force of the storm assaulted her. Wind-driven snow immediately coated her protective eyewear, and the cold cut through her layers with surgical precision. Maya switched on her flashlight, its powerful beam swallowed by the swirling white maelstrom just yards ahead. She moved carefully around the perimeter of the station, checking for structural concerns. Loose shutters, snow accumulation threatening. The roof, any signs of wildlife seeking inappropriate shelter. Maya had nearly completed her circuit, reaching the storage shed at the north corner of the compound, when she heard it. A sound that didn't belong to the storm's symphony. Not the wind's howl, not the creaking of burdened pine boughs, not the occasional rumble of snow shifting across the roof. This was something else entirely, a sound so faint it existed at the threshold of perception. She paused, tilting her head to isolate the noise from the storm's constant assault. There it came again, a soft, plaintive whine, almost like a question mark punctuating the wind's endless sentence. Maya shifted her flashlight beam toward the sound's apparent source, beyond the shed toward the beginning of the North Trail that became impassable each winter. At first, she saw nothing but undisturbed snowdrifts, then a slight movement, not the random pattern of wind-driven snow, but the deliberate motion of something alive. Maya approached cautiously, one hand moving instinctively to the bear spray, canister on her belt. Though predator encounters were rare during winter storms, desperation made all creatures unpredictable. The beam of her flashlight finally captured the source of the sound, and Maya froze in disbelief. A large dog, no, a German shepherd, lay partially concealed in the snow beneath the limited protection of a pine's lower branches. The animal's dark fur was matted with ice and what appeared to be dried blood. Its ribs protruded sharply, telling a story of prolonged hunger. But most shocking was what lay beneath the dog's emaciated body. Two tiny forms, impossibly small, their eyes still closed, trembling violently in the merciless cold. The mother dog raised her head with evident effort, amber eyes meeting Maya's with an expression that transcended species, not fear, not aggression, but something far more disarming. Recognition, as though she had been searching specifically for this place, this person. The dog made no sound beyond her labored breathing, expending what little energy remained on maintaining her protective position over her puppies. Maya's training overrode her shock. Hypothermia was the immediate threat for both the mother and her newborns. She approached slowly, speaking in the calm, measured tones she reserved for injured wildlife. "Easy there. I'm not going to hurt you. You found the right place." The dog watched her approach with wary attention, but made no aggressive move. As Maya drew closer, she noticed something that sent a chill through her body, colder than the surrounding storm. A harness partially obscured by matted fur and snow, bearing unmistakable military-style attachments and what appeared to be a faded alphanumeric designation, K9S7. This was no ordinary stray or abandoned pet. The harness, The designation, the dog's physical condition, all pointed to something far more complex than a random animal seeking shelter. But immediate survival took precedence over questions. Maya removed her outer parka despite the biting cold and carefully approached the dog. "I need to move your puppies," she explained, maintaining the steady stream of calm communication despite knowing the animal couldn't understand her words. "They'll die out here. So will you. I have shelter, food, warmth." The dog growled softly as Maya's hands approached the puppies, not in aggression, but in the weary tone of a being that had learned wariness through painful experience. Yet she didn't snap or pull away. She seemed to be assessing, evaluating, making a calculated decision. With extreme care, Maya gently lifted one of the tiny puppies. It weighed almost nothing, its little body cold even through her gloves. The second puppy followed, both tucked securely inside her parka against her body heat. The mother dog watched every movement, trembling with exhaustion, but maintaining focused attention. "Your turn," Maya said softly. "Can you walk?" The dog struggled to rise, legs buckling beneath her emaciated frame. Maya observed what appeared to be a partially healed wound on her hind leg, ragged and inflamed. Despite this obvious pain, the shepherd managed to stand, swaying slightly, eyes never leaving the parka where her puppies were sheltered. The journey back to the station, merely 50 yards, seemed endless. Maya moved slowly, allowing the injured dog to follow at her own pace. Twice the animal stumbled in the deep snow, and twice she rose again, driven by a determination Maya recognized from somewhere deep within herself, the kind of resilience that continued functioning when all rational calculations suggested surrender. When they finally reached the station door, Maya quickly transferred the puppies to a folded blanket near the hearth before returning to help the mother negotiate the 3 steps. Inside, with the door sealed against the storm, the full impact of the animal's condition became apparent under proper light. The German shepherd was severely malnourished, her once powerful frame reduced to skin stretched over bone. The wound on her leg showed signs of infection. Patches of fur were missing, revealing scarred tissue beneath, and most disturbingly, the military-style harness, now clearly visible, contained what appeared to be specialized equipment compartments, some torn open, one still sealed with an official-looking insignia partially obscured by dried mud. Maya's first priority was warming the puppies, who appeared to be no more than a few days old. Their eyes remained closed, tiny bodies shivering despite the cabin's warmth. She retrieved the emergency veterinary kit, standard equipment at all ranger stations, and quickly assembled a makeshift warming nest using heat packs designed for hypothermia treatment. After ensuring the heat level wouldn't harm the newborns, she placed them in this improvised incubator, watching anxiously as their violent trembling gradually subsided. The mother dog remained standing despite evident exhaustion, her attention fixed unwaveringly on her puppies. She swayed slightly, legs trembling with the effort of remaining upright, yet refused to collapse until certain of her offspring's safety. "They're okay," Maya said softly. "You kept them alive somehow. They're warming up now." When she approached the dog with a bowl of water, the animal initially tensed. Maya recognized the reaction from work with traumatized wildlife, the automatic response of a creature that associated human proximity with pain. She set the bowl down and stepped back, giving the shepherd space to make her own decision. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. After a moment's hesitation, the dog approached the water and began drinking with carefully controlled desperation, the measured consumption of one who had experienced extreme thirst but retained enough discipline to avoid. the sickness that comes from drinking too quickly after prolonged deprivation. This calculated behavior reinforced Maya's growing suspicion. This was no ordinary dog, but a highly trained military working animal, a canine unit with specialized training. The designation on the harness, the disciplined behavior despite extreme distress, the evidence of human-inflicted injuries, all suggested something far beyond an abandoned pet or even a standard service animal. Once the dog had finished drinking, Maya slowly approached with a towel. "I need to dry you off and check your injuries. I'll be gentle." The shepherd watched her approach, muscles tensed, but making no aggressive move. When Maya carefully began drying the matted fur, the dog permitted the contact with stoic endurance rather than appreciation. As Maya worked, she uncovered more evidence of the animal's difficult journey, additional scarring on the shoulders and neck, a pattern of healed injuries consistent with harsh training methods or punishment, and most significantly, what appeared to be a small surgical scar on the left flank, partially concealed by fur but unmistakably the work of human hands. Maya had completed some basic veterinary training as part of her ranger certification, enough to recognize that the leg wound required cleaning and antibiotics. She prepared the necessary supplies, speaking continuously in the same calm tone. "This will sting, but it needs to be cleaned. The infection could kill you if left untreated." The dog flinched when the antiseptic solution touched the wound, but remained still otherwise. Amber eyes fixed on Maya's face with an intelligence that felt almost unnervingly human. There was assessment in that gaze, calculation, and something more complex, a testing of Maya's intentions beyond the immediate treatment. Once the wound was cleaned and dressed, Maya prepared a small amount of high-protein food from her emergency supplies, carefully measured to avoid overwhelming a starved system. The dog ate with the same disciplined restraint she had shown while drinking, then immediately moved to check on her puppies, nosing them gently, seemingly counting and assessing their condition. Only when apparently satisfied with their safety did the shepherd finally allow herself to lie down beside the makeshift incubator, body positioned between the puppies and the cabin door in a clearly protective posture. Even in her depleted state, the dog maintained vigilance, ears shifting toward every small sound, eyes drifting closed, only to snap open at the slightest movement from Maya. Maya maintained a respectful distance, observing this extraordinary animal who had somehow traversed what must have been miles of wilderness in brutal winter conditions while protecting newborn puppies. The level of determination, intelligence, and sheer will required for such a journey spoke to training and breeding far beyond ordinary domestication. But it also raised disturbing questions about what circumstances would drive such a highly trained military asset to flee with newborn puppies into wilderness during a winter storm. The radio crackled with the 11 p.m. check-in, causing the shepherd to snap immediately to alertness, a low growl rising from her throat. "Blackridge, this is Central. Confirm status. Over." Maya moved slowly to respond, keeping her movements deliberate and visible. "Central, Blackridge here. Situation unchanged. Station secure." She hesitated, then added, "Have encountered injured wildlife seeking shelter. Implementing standard protocols. Will update if assistance required. Over." "Roger, Blackridge. Weather system intensifying overnight. Next scheduled contact 0700 unless emergency conditions develop. Central out." Maya returned the radio to its charger and sat down at her desk, maintaining line of sight with the dog. And puppies. The shepherd watched her with unwavering attention, exhaustion evident in her trembling legs, but determination clear in her alert posture. Maya recognized something in those amber eyes, something beyond animal intelligence or trained response. There was a story there, written in scars and hardship, in the desperate journey through wilderness, in the protective stance over puppies that should never have survived such conditions. "You're safe now," Maya said quietly. "Whatever you're running from, whatever happened to you, it can't reach you here, not tonight, not in this storm." The dog didn't relax at her words, maintaining her vigilant position. Maya understood. Trust wasn't established through words, but through consistent actions over time. She had learned the same lesson in her years working with traumatized wildlife. And if she were honest with herself, in her own response to trauma, some wounds required more than immediate treatment. They required patience, space, and proof that safety wasn't merely temporary. Maya settled into the chair by her desk, positioning it to keep both the door and the animals in view. She wouldn't sleep tonight, not with an unknown animal in her station, not with questions multiplying in her mind about the dog's origins and condition. Instead, she opened her laptop and began researching military working dogs, K9 units, and the significance of the designation she had observed on the harness. The information she found raised more questions than answers. Military working dogs underwent extensive training, represented significant investment, and were considered valuable assets. Their handlers developed close bonds with them, and protocols existed for their care, deployment, and eventual retirement. What she was seeing, an apparently abandoned or escaped military K9 in severely neglected condition, represented significant deviation from standard procedures. As the night deepened and the storm raged outside, Maya continued her research while observing the extraordinary animal who had sought refuge at her station. The dog maintained her protective position beside her puppies, fighting exhaustion with visible determination. Occasionally her eyes would drift closed, only to snap open at the slightest sound, constantly scanning for threats even in her depleted state. Maya recognized the behavior from her own experiences after the rockslide incident. The hypervigilance, the inability to truly rest, the constant expectation of danger. She had seen it in rescued wildlife too traumatized for rehabilitation and release. The persistent, exhausting state of a being for whom safety had become a theoretical concept rather than a lived experience. "I know what that's like," she said softly, more to herself than the dog, "when standing down doesn't feel possible anymore." The shepherd's ears twitched at her voice, amber eyes locking briefly with Maya's before resuming their vigilant scanning. In that momentary connection, Maya felt something shift, not trust, not yet, but perhaps the first tentative recognition of shared experience across the seemingly unbridgeable gulf between species. Outside, the storm intensified, wind howling, like a living entity demanding entrance. Snow accumulated against the window panes, and the temperature display showed an external reading of 26 degrees below zero. Yet inside, beside the steadily burning fire, two creatures who had learned wariness through painful experience maintained their separate vigils. The dog guarding her vulnerable offspring, the ranger watching over unexpected visitors while questioning what circumstances had brought them to her isolated doorstep. Maya checked the time, just past midnight. The puppies seemed stable now, their breathing more regular, tiny bodies no longer trembling with cold. The mother continued her exhausted vigilance, fighting sleep with diminishing success as her depleted body demanded recovery. Maya made a decision and slowly rose from her chair. "I'm going to check on your little ones," she said, maintaining the steady narrative that seemed to help the dog anticipate her movements. "They need hydration and nutrition. Newborns can't regulate their own body temperature or blood sugar." She moved deliberately toward the emergency veterinary kit, removing supplies for neonatal animal care. The shepherd watched every movement, muscles tensing as Maya approached the makeshift incubator. She growled softly, not threatening but cautionary, a communication rather than a warning. "I understand," Maya responded. "They're yours. I'm just helping." She knelt at a respectful distance, showing the small syringe of glucose solution she had prepared. The dog's gaze shifted between Maya's face and her hands, assessing intention with remarkable discernment. After a moment of evaluation, the shepherd shifted slightly, creating space for Maya to access the puppies while maintaining protective proximity. With extreme care, Maya administered tiny amounts of the solution to each puppy, massaging their throats gently to stimulate swallowing. The little creatures responded with weak movements, encouraging signs of improving condition. Throughout the procedure, the mother watched intently, missing nothing, permitting the intervention, but clearly prepared to terminate it instantly if she perceived threat to her offspring. When Maya had finished, she backed away respectfully, returning to her observation post. The shepherd inspected each puppy thoroughly, nose moving carefully over their tiny bodies, seemingly performing her own assessment of their condition. Apparently satisfied, she settled back into her protective position, though her eyes remained on Maya with unwavering attention. As the night progressed, Maya maintained her vigil while continuing research. What she discovered about military, working dogs, their training methods, deployment conditions, and the significant financial investment they represented made their abandonment or escape increasingly difficult to explain through legitimate channels. Canine units were tracked, monitored, and maintained with rigorous protocols. For one to appear in this condition, in remote wilderness, protecting newborn puppies that official programs would never have permitted to be born, suggested disturbing possibilities beyond standard military operations. Around 2 a.m., Maya noticed the shepherd's vigilance finally succumbing to exhaustion. The dog's head lowered, her blinks becoming longer, though she continued fighting sleep with obvious determination. Maya recognized the pattern from her own experiences with trauma, the fear that safety might vanish the moment vigilance lapsed, the body's demands for recovery battling the mind's insistence on continued alertness. "It's okay to rest," she said softly. "I'm keeping watch. Nothing will happen to them while you sleep." The dog's eyes met hers again, holding contact longer this time. In that gaze, Maya read exhaustion, wariness, and something that transcended simple animal intelligence. A weighing of options, a calculation of risk versus necessity, a decision being formulated with complexity beyond instinct. Slowly, deliberately, the shepherd shifted position. Rather than maintaining the directly protective stance between puppies and door, she settled into a position that allowed her to rest her head while keeping both her offspring and Maya in view. Her eyes remained open, but her breathing deepened, slightly, not fully asleep, but permitting herself the first level of rest. Maya recognized the significance of this small adjustment. It wasn't trust, not yet, but the first conditional acceptance that mutual vigilance might be possible. For an animal with this one's obvious history of mistreatment, even this minimal relaxation of hypervigilance represented remarkable adaptation. "Thank you," Maya said quietly, "for letting me help, for finding this place." The dog's ears twitched at her voice, but her position remained unchanged. Maya continued her own watch, dividing attention between her unexpected guests and the ongoing research that painted an increasingly disturbing picture of what might have led them to her door. By dawn, the storm had achieved peak intensity. Wind speeds approached 80 miles per hour, and visibility had dropped to 0 beyond the immediate perimeter of the station. Radio reports confirmed this system had developed beyond forecasted parameters, with expected duration extending another 72 hours minimum. No physical assistance or evacuation would be possible until the weather cleared. Maya had conducted hourly checks on the puppies throughout the night, administering small amounts of nutrient solution each time. The mother permitted these interventions with increasing tolerance, though her attention never wavered. By morning, the tiny creatures showed significant improvement, more active movements, stronger responses to touch, and notably improved color. The shepherd's condition remained concerning. Though she had consumed small amounts of food and water, her extreme malnourishment, infected wound, and overall exhaustion indicated a need for veterinary care beyond Maya's capabilities. Yet the storm made evacuation impossible, forcing reliance on the limited medical supplies available at the station. As daylight gradually illuminated the cabin, Maya took the opportunity to examine the military harness she had removed from the dog during the night. The construction was sophisticated. Multiple specialized compartments, reinforced straps, and what appeared to be attachment points for tactical equipment. The designation K9S7 was clearly stenciled on one strap, while other markings had been deliberately obscured, the fabric sliced where identifying patches would normally be located. One compartment remained sealed, secured with a specialized fastener Maya didn't recognize. After careful examination, she determined it could be opened without damage, though doing so required precision. Inside, she found a small metallic object, approximately the size of a rice grain, unmistakably electronic in nature, though unfamiliar in specific function. Maya placed this object on her desk and returned to her research. Combining search terms related to military working dogs, tracking, devices, and specialized canine units, she uncovered disturbing references to experimental programs operating without standard oversight, projects exploring enhanced training methods, specialized deployment capabilities, and increased battlefield effectiveness. These programs existed in gray areas of military contracting, with limited documentation and concerning gaps in accountability. Several reports mentioned specialized microchips used for tracking, monitoring physical status, and even recording operational data. The descriptions matched the small electronic component Maya had discovered in the harness compartment. As morning progressed, Maya continued dividing her attention between research and care for her unexpected guests. The puppy's condition improved steadily, their movements becoming stronger, their responses to stimulation more vigorous. The mother accepted Maya's interventions with cautious tolerance, though her protective vigilance never fully relaxed. Maya had begun preparing a more substantial meal for the shepherd when the satellite phone, reserved for emergency communications when radio systems failed, emitted its distinctive alert tone. The dog immediately tensed, rising to a defensive position despite evident pain. "Easy," Maya said calmly. "Just a communication device." She answered cautiously, "Blackridge Station, Ranger Collins." The voice on the other end belonged to Regional Director Harmon, a rare direct contact that suggested unusual circumstances. "Collins, glad we connected. Weather Service indicates you're experiencing extreme conditions. Status report? Station, secure, supplies adequate. Storm intensifying beyond projections, but all protocols in place. Good. We've received an unusual request concerning your location. Military Liaison Office contacted regional headquarters regarding a potentially dangerous animal that may be in your vicinity. Described as a German shepherd, possibly injured. Considered federal property and potentially dangerous. Any sightings to report?" Maya's gaze shifted to the shepherd, who watched her with unwavering attention, body positioned protectively over her puppies. The dog's condition, the evidence of mistreatment, the desperate journey through wilderness to reach sanctuary, the surgical scars and specialized equipment, all told a story dramatically inconsistent with standard military canine protocols. Whatever this animal was running from, whatever she had endured, it had driven her to risk death in brutal wilderness conditions while protecting newborn puppies. Maya made a decision that would irrevocably alter her carefully constructed isolation. "Negative, Director. No unusual wildlife sightings. Station perimeter secure and monitored." "Understood. If you do encounter this animal, immediate notification is required. Consider it dangerous and do not approach." Military personnel will handle retrieval when weather permits. Acknowledged. Blackridge out. Maya ended the call and stood motionless, processing the implications of what had just transpired. For the first time in 3 years, she had deliberately violated protocols, provided false information to a superior, and placed herself in direct opposition to official directives. The carefully maintained barrier between herself and potential responsibility for others' well-being had been breached by her own choice. The shepherd continued watching her, amber eyes reflecting an intelligence that seemed to comprehend the significance of the moment. Maya approached slowly and knelt before the dog, maintaining respectful distance but establishing direct eye contact. "They're looking for you," she said quietly, "but they didn't mention puppies. They called you federal property, not a service animal. They said you're dangerous." The dog maintained unwavering attention, ears forward, processing Maya's words. Not with understanding of language, but with remarkable assessment of tone, intent, and emotional content. "I don't know what happened to you," Maya continued. "I don't know what you're running from or why you came here, but I recognize enough to know that whatever they did to you, whatever they're doing, isn't right." She extended her hand, palm up, making no attempt to touch but offering connection. The shepherd regarded this gesture with evident calculation, weighing options through some internal process more complex than instinct. After long consideration, the dog extended her muzzle forward, not to accept contact, but to catch Maya's, assent more clearly, gathering additional information for her assessment. "I made a choice just now," Maya said softly. "And so did you when you came here. So we're in this together now, whatever this turns out to be." Outside, the storm continued. Its assault, isolation transforming from barrier to protection, as snow accumulated against the station walls. Inside, two beings accustomed to wariness began negotiating a tentative alliance, founded not on trust, but on recognition of shared purpose. Protection of vulnerable lives against forces that viewed them as expendable. And in that moment of mutual recognition across species boundaries, something shifted in Maya Collins, the first hairline fracture in the protective shell she had constructed around herself since 7 body bags had been airlifted from the mountain under her watch. The morning light struggled through snow-covered windows, casting a diffused glow across the ranger station's interior. Maya had maintained her vigil through the night, dividing attention between caring for the puppies, monitoring the mothers, condition, and researching military working dogs. Her laptop screen displayed dozens of open tabs, specialized canine training facilities, experimental programs operating under classified parameters, and disturbing reports of enhanced conditioning. Methods existing outside standard military protocols. The storm had intensified beyond even the revised forecasts, with wind speeds now consistently above 70 miles per hour and visibility reduced to 0 beyond the immediate perimeter of the station. The temperature had plummeted to 30, below 0, transforming the wilderness outside into an environment lethal to any unprotected creature within minutes of exposure. Maya checked her watch. Nearly time for the scheduled 7 a.m. radio check-in. She had spent the last hour mentally rehearsing her approach, knowing that every communication would now require careful consideration. The decision to withhold information about the shepherd had transformed her professional obligations, requiring a balance between maintaining necessary operational contact and protecting the animals now under her care. The radio crackled to life, precisely on schedule. "Blackridge, this is Central. Storm conditions have escalated to Category 5. All non-essential personnel evacuated from regional stations. Confirm status and supply situation over," Maya responded with practiced calm. "Central, Blackridge confirming. Station infrastructure intact. Emergency protocols activated. Supplies sufficient for extended isolation. All systems functional. Over." "Roger, Blackridge." Be advised, military personnel have filed an urgent retrieval request for your sector regarding missing equipment. Authorization pending weather clearance. Maintain standard protocols and report any unusual activity immediately. Next check-in. 1300 hours, central out. The transmission ended, leaving Maya to process this new information. The missing equipment undoubtedly referred to the shepherd, a classification that spoke volumes about how the animal was viewed by those searching for her. Not as a living being deserving humane treatment, but as property to be recovered regardless of condition. The dog had been listening to the transmission with evident attention, body tensed at the mention of military personnel despite not understanding the specific words. Maya had observed this response pattern consistently. The shepherd reacted, not just to tones, but to specific terms associated with her previous handlers, suggesting a level of language recognition beyond typical canine capabilities. "They're escalating the search," Maya said, maintaining the habit of verbal communication that seemed to help the dog anticipate her intentions. "But they can't reach us for at least 3 days in these conditions." The shepherd watched her with that unsettling intelligence, head slightly tilted as though processing not just Maya's words, but the implications behind them. Her physical condition had improved marginally overnight. The antibiotics were fighting the infection in her leg, wound, and the regulated feeding was beginning to address her severe malnourishment. But true recovery would require weeks of proper care, nutrition, and rest, none of which would be possible if she were retrieved as military equipment. The puppies showed more dramatic improvement, their tiny bodies responding remarkably to regular feeding and stable warmth. They had begun making stronger vocalizations, little squeaks and whimpers that their mother responded to immediately, nosing them gently and occasionally cleaning them with careful attention. Their eyes remained closed, indicating they were less than 10 days old, a fact that made their survival through wilderness conditions even more extraordinary. Maya approached the makeshift nesting area where the puppies lay, carrying the nutrient solution she'd prepared for their morning feeding. The shepherd watched attentively, but without the intense wariness of the previous night, now allowing Maya to kneel beside the nest without shifting to a defensive position. "They're doing well," Maya said quietly. "You did something impossible, getting them here alive." As she administered the feeding solution to each puppy, Maya's mind continued processing the implications of what she had discovered. The information she had gathered pointed to a disturbing reality. While standard military working dogs were treated according to established protocols with oversight and accountability, this animal appeared to have come from something different. The designation K9S7, the specialized equipment, the surgical implant site, the deliberate removal of identifying markers, all suggested a program operating outside normal parameters. Once the puppies were fed, Maya turned her attention to their mother. The shepherd's wound required cleaning and redressing, but approaching an injured animal capable of inflicting serious damage demanded careful consideration. Maya gathered the necessary supplies and positioned herself where the dog could clearly observe her actions. "I need to check your leg," she explained, displaying the antiseptic solution and fresh bandages. The infection could spread if not treated properly. The dog watched her preparations with evident assessment, then slowly shifted position to make the injured leg more accessible, a deliberate choice that spoke to remarkable reasoning capacity. Maya approached with measured movements, narrating each step. "This will sting again, but it's necessary. The antibiotics are helping, but the wound needs to be kept clean." As Maya worked, she noticed additional details about the dog's condition that had been less visible in the dim emergency lighting of the previous night. Beyond the obvious malnourishment and the infected leg wound, there were systematic patterns of scarring beneath the fur, evidence of repeated injuries consistent with harsh training methods or deliberate mistreatment. Most concerning was a series of small, precise scars along the spine, spaced at regular intervals and showing signs of surgical precision. The shepherd remained still throughout the treatment, watching Maya's hands with steady attention, but making no aggressive move. Despite evident discomfort, this level of self-control exceeded normal canine behavior, suggesting specialized training focused on pain tolerance and submission to medical procedures regardless of personal distress. "What did they do to you?" Maya murmured, the question emerging unbidden as she observed the pattern of healed injuries. "What kind of program creates this?" The dog's ears twitched at her tone, amber eyes meeting Maya's with an expression that seemed to transcend species boundaries, a look containing awareness beyond instinct or conditioning, carrying something that appeared remarkably like a conscious decision to communicate. Slowly, deliberately, the shepherd turned her head, revealing an area behind her left ear previously concealed by matted fur. Maya carefully brushed the fur aside and discovered what the dog seemed intent on showing her, a small, precise scar, approximately 1 centimeter in length, with the faint outline of something beneath the skin. "Another implant," Maya realized, gently examining the area. "Similar to what I found in your harness compartment, but still in place." The implication was significant. The shepherd wasn't simply showing random injuries, but deliberately revealing something she appeared to understand was important. Something perhaps connected to why she had fled through wilderness in winter conditions while heavily pregnant or newly delivered. Maya completed the treatment and bandaging, then provided the carefully measured morning meal. The dog ate with the same disciplined restraint she had demonstrated previously, consuming exactly what was offered without the desperate gulping typical of a starved animal. After finishing, she immediately returned to her puppies, checking them thoroughly before settling into a protective position that nonetheless allowed Maya to approach if necessary. This behavior pattern reinforced Maya's growing understanding. This was no ordinary dog, not even a standard military working animal. The level of reasoning, the deliberate communication, the strategic decision-making all pointed to capabilities beyond normal canine cognitive parameters, even for the most rigorously trained service animals. Maya returned to her laptop, adding, "Search terms related to enhanced animal cognition and experimental military programs." The results were sparse but disturbing. References to classified initiatives exploring cognitive enhancement, specialized conditioning protocols, and integration of technological monitoring beyond standard tracking methods. Several whistleblower reports mentioned programs terminated due to ethical concerns, only to resurface under different designations, with private contractors operating outside regular military oversight. The more Maya discovered, the more disturbing the implications became. The shepherd's condition, the implants, the deliberate obscuring of identifying markers, all suggested an animal fleeing not just harsh conditions, but something systemically abusive, something its handlers would pursue despite extreme weather conditions and the involvement of civilian authorities. By midday, Maya had compiled sufficient information to form a working hypothesis. K9S7 had escaped or been released from a classified program involving enhanced cognitive capabilities, technological integration, and likely experimental conditioning methods. The presence of newborn puppies, offspring, that would presumably share genetic predisposition for these enhanced capabilities, elevated their value beyond even the mother's considerable investment. The military's classification of the shepherd, as equipment rather than a service animal, provided convenient justification for retrieval methods that might otherwise raise ethical or legal questions. Maya paused in her research, turning to observe the dog who had sought refuge at her station. The shepherd lay beside her puppies, one foreleg protectively extended across their small bodies, yet her attention remained divided between her offspring and Maya's movements. Despite evident exhaustion, despite injuries and malnourishment, the animal maintained a level of situational awareness that spoke to both intensive training and inherent intelligence. A realization gradually crystallized. In Maya's mind, this wasn't simply about providing temporary shelter to an injured animal. The shepherd had made a deliberate choice to seek specific sanctuary, navigating wilderness in lethal conditions while protecting vulnerable offspring. She had demonstrated not just instinctive maternal protection, but strategic planning and remarkable endurance in service of a clear objective, reaching safety beyond the reach of those she had fled. Maya had made her own choice in response, one with potentially serious professional consequences. By withholding information from her superiors and actively misleading military personnel, she had aligned herself with the dog's implied objective. The question now was how to proceed beyond immediate survival concerns, how to address the shepherd's long-term safety once the storm cleared and isolation no longer provided natural protection. As Maya considered these questions, she noticed a subtle shift in the dog's behavior. The shepherd had risen to a sitting position, ears forward, head tilted in the distinctive posture of attention to distant sounds. Maya listened, but heard nothing beyond the constant howl of wind and occasional creaking of the station's structure under snow load. "What do you hear?" she asked quietly. The dog's focus intensified, gaze fixed on the northeastern wall of the station, hackles rising slightly along her spine. Maya moved toward the emergency gear locker, retrieving binoculars with enhanced visibility features designed for navigation in poor weather conditions. She approached the window indicated by the shepherd's attention, scanning the whiteout conditions. Beyond, at first, she saw nothing but swirling snow and the ghostly outlines of pine trees bending under the storm's force. Then, a movement too deliberate to be weather-driven, approximately 300 yards from the station perimeter. Maya adjusted the binocular's settings, enhancing contrast to penetrate the snow curtain more effectively. The image resolved into a human figure in white, cold-weather gear, moving with the deliberate pattern of someone conducting a systematic search pattern despite nearly impossible conditions. The figure carried what appeared to be specialized equipment, not standard survival gear, but something more technological in nature, with periodic adjustments suggesting active scanning or monitoring. Maya froze, processing the implications. Standard search and rescue operations had been suspended due to extreme conditions. No civilian would be navigating the wilderness in a Category 5 winter storm 3 miles from the nearest access road. The timing, immediately following the military inquiry about a missing canine unit, couldn't be coincidental. The shepherd's reaction confirmed Maya's assessment. This wasn't a lost hiker or standard patrol, but someone specifically searching for the dog. The animal's posture had transformed from alert observation to controlled tension, a low growl emerging. So quietly it was barely audible even in the station's silence. Her body positioned itself automatically between the perceived threat and her puppies, the instinctive response of a mother protecting offspring overlaid with what appeared to be recognition of specific danger. Maya moved away from the window, mind racing through implications and options. The figure's presence 3 miles from the nearest access point in lethal weather conditions spoke to both specialized training and high-priority objectives. The technology they carried suggested capabilities beyond standard tracking, possibly equipment designed to detect the very implants she had discovered in the shepherd's harness and behind her ear. Standard protocols required her to report any human presence near the station during extreme weather conditions, potentially facilitating rescue operations. But the circumstances, the military inquiry, the dog's evident fear, the deliberate off-grid approach during a Category 5 storm, all suggested this wasn't a rescue situation, but a retrieval operation conducted outside official channels. Maya made another decision, one that further committed her to the path she had chosen with her earlier deception. She reached for the station's emergency response kit and removed a specialized transmitter designed to disrupt electronic signals. During avalanche rescue operations, when overlapping emergency beacons might interfere with accurate location. "This might help," she told the shepherd, who watched her preparations with evident attention. "If they're tracking your implant, this should create enough interference to mask the signal." Maya activated the device, adjusting its parameters to create maximum disruption across frequencies typically used for tracking equipment. The unit emitted a soft hum as it began broadcasting interfering signals, effectively creating an electronic smokescreen around the station. She returned to the window, careful to remain concealed while observing the figure's movements. For several minutes, the searcher continued their methodical pattern, periodically checking what appeared to be a handheld monitoring device. Then their behavior changed. Repeated adjustments to the equipment, change of direction, evident frustration in their body language. After several failed attempts to re-establish whatever signal they had been following, the figure finally turned and began moving away from the station, back toward the wilderness boundary. Maya continued observation until the searcher disappeared completely into the swirling snow. The shepherd remained alert throughout, tracking Maya's movements while maintaining her protective position near the puppies. Only when Maya finally stepped away from the window did the dog's posture relax slightly, though her attention remained elevated compared to earlier behavior. "They're gone for now," Maya said, returning to kneel near the dog. "But they'll be back when the storm clears, probably with better equipment and official authorization." The shepherd met her gaze with that unsettling intelligence, seeming to process implications beyond immediate threat assessment. Maya found herself speaking to the dog not as one would to a pet or even a service animal, but almost as one would address a sentient being capable of complex understanding. "I need to know more about what we're dealing with," she continued. "Who you are, what program you came from, why they're so determined to retrieve you. The implant behind your ear might contain data, but removing it without proper equipment could be dangerous." Maya returned to her laptop, conducting additional research now focused on specific parameters, classified K9 programs utilizing implant, technology, cognitive enhancement initiatives, and private contractors operating with military funding but limited oversight. Several reports mentioned a facility identified only as Nexus Operations, referenced in connection with discontinued experimental programs later re-established under different classification. As afternoon approached, Maya prepared for the scheduled radio check-in, conscious that each communication now carried additional significance. The shepherd observed these preparations with evident attention, positioning herself where she could monitor both Maya and the communications equipment while maintaining proximity to her puppies. The radio activated precisely on schedule. "Blackridge, this is Central. Status update required. Over." "Central, Blackridge confirming. Station conditions unchanged, all systems functional. Weather monitoring indicates increased storm intensity, but structural integrity maintained. Over." "Roger, Blackridge. Be advised Director Harmon requests immediate notification of any unusual activity in your sector. Military Liaison Office has elevated retrieval priority for missing equipment. Satellite monitoring shows potential unauthorized. Personnel in your vicinity approximately 3 hours ago. Any sightings to report?" Maya's pulse quickened, but her voice remained steady. "Negative, Central. Visibility limited to immediate station perimeter. No unauthorized personnel observed. Will maintain elevated vigilance and report any contact. Immediately. Over. Understood, Blackridge. Be advised, military personnel have been authorized for direct contact once weather permits approach to your station. Expect arrival approximately 72 hours, dependent on storm duration. Central out. The transmission ended, leaving Maya with confirmation of her suspicions. The searcher she had observed wasn't operating under official authorization. Their presence hadn't been coordinated with Park Service operations, and Central's report indicated their movement had been detected via satellite monitoring rather than through official channels. Yet the military now had pending authorization for direct contact, suggesting parallel operations, one official and one operating outside standard protocols. Maya turned to the shepherd, who had been listening to the transmission with the same focused attention she demonstrated during all communications. "We have 3 days," she said quietly. 3 days before they can reach us officially, but the one I saw today might return sooner, operating outside authorized channels." The dog maintained eye contact, her intelligence evident in the quality of her attention. Maya found herself increasingly convinced that the shepherd understood far more than normal canine cognitive parameters would suggest possible, that whatever program she had escaped had created something beyond standard animal capabilities, something approaching communication and reasoning in ways that blurred established boundaries. Maya returned to her research with renewed urgency, searching for any information that might identify the program behind K9S7's creation and condition. The designation itself provided few results, but combining search terms related to cognitive enhancement, neural implants, and private military contractors yielded disturbing connections. References to a program codenamed Sentinel involving canine subjects with augmented capabilities and integrated monitoring systems. Several reports mentioned ethical concerns, leading to program suspension, followed by transfer to private contractor oversight, where military regulations governing animal treatment could be circumvented through classification and jurisdictional technicalities. The most recent references dated approximately 4 years earlier, after which all public documentation ceased, suggesting either program termination or, more likely, elevated classification beyond public access. As Maya compiled this information, she became increasingly convinced that the shepherd represented something beyond conventional military working dogs. An experimental subject in a program operating outside standard ethical oversight, utilizing methods and technologies not approved for general implementation. The animal's condition, capabilities, and the aggressive pursuit despite extreme conditions all supported this assessment. The implications extended beyond immediate safety concerns to larger ethical questions. If her assessment was accurate, the shepherd wasn't simply fleeing harsh treatment, but systematic abuse within a program unauthorized to create offspring carrying valuable genetic material. The puppies represented both unintended consequences and potentially valuable assets, subjects that would inherit their mother's enhanced capabilities without the conditioning process that had clearly traumatized her. Maya's thoughts were interrupted by movement from the dog. The shepherd had risen and was approaching with measured steps, her attention fixed on Maya rather than divided between multiple potential threats, as had been her pattern. She stopped within arm's reach, closer than she had voluntarily positioned herself previously, and deliberately placed her muzzle against Maya's hand. The gesture carried unmistakable meaning, not merely acceptance of Maya's presence or resigned tolerance of necessary care, but deliberate initiation of contact. From an animal that had demonstrated consistent wariness and protective distance, this represented a significant shift, a conscious choice to establish connection. Maya remained still, allowing the dog to determine the nature and duration of The contact. After a moment, the shepherd stepped back and returned to her puppies, settling beside them with the same protective attentiveness, but with notably reduced tension in her posture. "Thank you," Maya said quietly, understanding that something important had just transpired, a declaration of provisional trust from a being with every reason to reject human contact entirely. Outside, the storm continued its relentless assault, isolation serving as temporary protection, while Maya considered longer-term strategies. The 3-day window before official contact became possible provided limited opportunity for action, but also established clear parameters within which to formulate plans. Maya moved to the station's supply storage, conducting inventory of resources that might support options beyond passive waiting. The emergency veterinary kit contained basic surgical instruments, not ideal for implant removal, but potentially adequate with proper preparation. The communications equipment included backup systems that could be repurposed for scanning electronic signatures. The emergency cache contained identity documentation and funds intended for evacuation scenarios where normal administrative channels might be compromised. As Maya assessed these resources, she felt something shifting within herself, a clarity of purpose that had been absent since the rockslide incident 3 years earlier. The careful isolation she had constructed, the deliberate avoidance of responsibility for others' well-being, the rigid adherence to protocols that prevented engagement. Beyond minimum requirements, all were being systematically dismantled by the choices she had already made. The shepherd had sought sanctuary at her station not randomly, but deliberately, navigating lethal conditions to reach this specific location while protecting vulnerable offspring. Maya had responded not through obligation, but through choice, aligning herself with the dog's evident objective, safety beyond the reach of those who viewed her as property rather than a living being deserving humane treatment. In making these choices, Maya had reconnected with aspects of herself long suppressed, the capacity for moral discernment beyond rigid protocols, the willingness to accept responsibility despite potential consequences, the ability to form connection across boundaries of species and experience. These qualities had once defined her approach to ranger service before trauma and guilt transformed protection into isolation, engagement into withdrawal. As evening approached, Maya prepared the station for nightfall, checking systems and securing perimeters while maintaining the electronic disruption field that had successfully confused the unauthorized searcher. The shepherd observed these preparations with evident attention, her own vigilance seemingly calibrated to complement rather than duplicate Maya's activities, a coordination of effort that spoke to remarkable adaptive intelligence. The puppies continued showing improvement, their movements stronger, vocalizations more frequent and varied. Maya administered their evening feeding with the shepherd's willing cooperation, noting developmental markers that suggested normal progression despite their traumatic early days. Their mother's condition showed less dramatic improvement, but measurable stabilization, infection responding to antibiotics, proper nutrition beginning the long process of addressing severe malnourishment, strategic rest allowing conservation of limited energy reserves. As darkness fell, transforming the wilderness outside into an impenetrable black void, punctuated only by snow illuminated in the station's external security lights, Maya completed her evening communications check with carefully measured information. Disclosure: the expected 72-hour time frame for storm clearance remained unchanged, maintaining the protective isolation that currently prevented direct intervention from those seeking to retrieve the shepherd. With immediate safety protocols established, Maya turned her attention to longer-term considerations. The information she had gathered pointed to a classified program operating outside standard ethical guidelines, utilizing experimental enhancement methods on animals protected under existing regulations. The evidence of physical mistreatment, the sophisticated tracking implants, and the aggressive pursuit despite extreme conditions all suggested operations that would not withstand public or regulatory scrutiny. This assessment created leverage, potentially useful in protecting both the shepherd and her puppies beyond the temporary sanctuary of storm isolation. Documentation of the dog's condition, analysis of the implant technology, and proper channels for whistleblower protection could transform a simple retrieval operation into a problematic exposure risk for those responsible, shifting calculations. Regarding the advisability of aggressive recovery methods, as Maya considered these possibilities, she noticed the shepherd watching her with that remarkable focus that suggested processing beyond normal canine capabilities. The dog's head was slightly tilted, ears forward, attention completely directed toward Maya's expressions and movements in a manner that reinforced the impression of cognitive capabilities exceeding standard parameters. "We need a plan beyond." "Waiting," Maya said, continuing the practice of verbal communication that seemed to resonate with the dog's apparent comprehension abilities. "They'll reach us eventually, officially or otherwise. We need leverage, evidence, and options." The shepherd maintained that focused attention, then deliberately rose and moved toward the harness Maya had removed the previous night. She nosed the equipment, then looked back at Maya with clear intentionality, a communication method primitive compared to language, but remarkably sophisticated for interspecies interaction. Maya approached, examining the harness more thoroughly. Beyond the compartment where she had discovered the first implant, several other storage areas contained specialized equipment. A miniaturized data storage device, what appeared to be a specialized medical delivery system, and most significantly, a small metallic tag with engraved coordinates partially obscured by deliberate scratching. "You're showing me something," Maya said quietly, examining the damaged tag. "Coordinates. A location." After careful examination and digital enhancement using the station's equipment, Maya was able to reconstruct the complete coordinates. A location approximately 30 miles southeast of the ranger station in a remote area officially designated as Private Natural Research Preserve owned by a corporation called Nexus Biodevelopment. A search for this entity revealed limited public information, a subsidiary of larger military contractor established 5 years earlier with permits for environmental research and wildlife monitoring. ZEED2. The location itself appeared in satellite imagery as a complex of buildings surrounded by security perimeter, accessible only by helicopter or specialized all-terrain vehicles, with no public access roads within 15 miles. "Nexus Operations," Maya murmured, recognizing the name from her earlier research into classified enhancement programs. "That's where you came from." The shepherd watched her with that unnerving intelligence, the dog's behavior suggesting not just coincidental interest, but deliberate communication, presenting specific information for Maya's attention, then observing her processing and response. This interaction cemented Maya's growing conviction that whatever program had created K9S7 had produced capabilities far beyond standard service animal parameters. Cognitive functions approaching communication, reasoning, and strategic planning typically considered exclusive to higher primates and humans. The implications were both fascinating and disturbing, raising fundamental questions about ethical boundaries in enhancement research and the treatment of subjects demonstrating advanced cognitive capabilities. As night deepened and the storm maintained its relentless assault, Maya continued developing contingency plans, while the shepherd maintained her vigilant protection of the puppies. Two beings from different species, both accustomed to isolation forged through trauma, now aligned in provisional alliance against forces that viewed one as property and the other as obstacle to be overcome or circumvented. In this unlikely partnership, Maya recognized something she had abandoned 3 years earlier, when 7 body bags were airlifted from the mountain under her jurisdiction, the essential quality that had originally drawn her to ranger service. Not merely protection of wilderness from human impact, but protection of all vulnerable beings within her sphere of influence, regardless of species designation or official classification. The storm outside represented both barrier and sanctuary, isolation transforming from punishment to protection, as Maya reconnected with purpose beyond protocol adherence. Whatever came when weather cleared and isolation ended, she had crossed a threshold from which retreat was no longer possible, committing to protection not through abstract adherence to regulations, but through genuine engagement with the specific beings who had sought sanctuary under her care. Dawn broke imperceptibly behind the wall of swirling snow that had transformed the wilderness into a monochrome void. The storm maintained its Category 5 intensity, wind speeds consistently above 70 miles per hour, creating snowdrifts that now reached halfway up the station's reinforced windows. Inside, the rhythm of survival continued. Systems checks, communications monitoring, and care for the 3 unexpected guests who had dramatically altered Maya's carefully maintained isolation. The puppies showed remarkable improvement after 36 hours of proper care. Their movements had strengthened considerably, their vocalizations becoming more varied and frequent. The smaller of the 2, a female with distinctive white markings on her chest, had begun attempting to crawl, tiny legs pushing against the blankets with surprising determination. Her brother, slightly larger with uniform dark coloring, vocalized, more frequently, demanding attention with high-pitched squeaks that his mother responded to instantly. The shepherd's condition had stabilized, but remained concerning. While the antibiotics were effectively fighting the infection in her leg wound, her severe malnourishment represented a longer-term challenge requiring sustained nutrition and rest, neither easily achieved while she maintained constant vigilance over her puppies and environment. Despite these physical limitations, her cognitive alertness remained extraordinary, attention shifting between her offspring, Maya's activities, and potential external threats with remarkable discernment. Maya had spent the night alternating between research and planning, compiling information about Nexus biodevelopment and the coordinates discovered on the dog's harness. The facility appeared in no public military documentation, but showed connections to classified funding through parent company financial disclosures. Permits for the installation mentioned only environmental research and wildlife monitoring, with no reference to military applications or animal subjects, a discrepancy that suggested deliberate concealment of actual operations. Most significantly, Maya had discovered 3 whistleblower complaints filed with regulatory agencies approximately 2 years earlier, all referencing ethical concerns about animal treatment at the facility. Each complaint had been dismissed through bureaucratic channels, citing national security exemptions and classification restrictions. The complainants' names were redacted, but contextual details suggested internal personnel with direct knowledge of operations. These findings reinforced Maya's working theory. The shepherd represented an experimental subject from a classified enhancement program operating outside standard ethical oversight, utilizing methods not approved for general implementation. The animal's extraordinary cognitive capabilities, the sophisticated implant technology, and the aggressive pursuit, despite extreme conditions, all supported this assessment. As Maya reviewed her compiled information, the scheduled morning radio check-in approached. Each communication now required careful consideration, balancing necessary operational contact with protection of her unauthorized guests. The shepherd seemed to recognize the significance of these transmissions, positioning herself where she could monitor both Maya and the communications equipment while maintaining proximity to her puppies. The radio activated precisely at 7 a.m. Blackridge, this is Central. Status update required over. Central, Blackridge confirming. Station conditions stable. All systems functional. Storm maintaining Category 5 parameters with no signs of abatement. Over. Roger, Blackridge. Weather service projections now indicate potential clearing within 48 hours rather than 72. Military liaison personnel have been notified of revised timeline. Be advised, aircraft will be dispatched for your sector immediately upon weather clearance. Priority, retrieval operation in progress. Acknowledge. Maya's pulse quickened at this development, but she maintained professional composure. Acknowledge, Central. Will prepare for aircraft arrival following storm clearance. Blackridge out. The reduced timeline created increased urgency. Maya had been operating on the assumption of 72 hours of protected isolation. The revised 48-hour window significantly compressed planning and preparation time. The immediate dispatch of aircraft following weather clearance indicated high-priority classification for the retrieval operation, consistent with recovery of valuable assets rather than standard search procedures. The shepherd had been listening with that focused attention she demonstrated during all communications. As the transmission ended, she rose and moved to the window facing northeast, the direction from which the unauthorized searcher had approached. The previous day, her posture communicated alert vigilance rather than immediate alarm. Ears forward, body slightly tensed but not indicating imminent threat. Maya joined her at the window, scanning the whiteout conditions with the enhanced visibility. Binoculars. At first, she detected nothing beyond the endless curtain of swirling snow and the ghostly outlines of pine boughs bending under accumulated weight. Then, movement at the extreme range of visibility, approximately 400 yards from the station perimeter. Adjusting the binoculars settings, Maya confirmed her suspicion. Two figures in specialized white cold-weather gear moved with the deliberate pattern of trained operators conducting systematic search procedures despite nearly impossible conditions. Unlike standard search and rescue personnel, they carried what appeared to be sophisticated technological equipment rather than survival gear, scanning devices similar to those used by the solitary searcher the previous day, but apparently more advanced in configuration. "They've upgraded their approach," Maya murmured, noting the tactical coordination between the two operators, working as a team with improved equipment. The shepherd growled softly, the sound barely audible but carrying unmistakable meaning. This wasn't random territorial response, but specific recognition of threat, confirmation that these weren't standard park personnel or rescue operators, but individuals associated with whatever program the dog had fled. Maya assessed options quickly. The electronic disruption field had successfully confused the previous day's search attempt, but the upgraded equipment and coordinated approach suggested countermeasures developed specifically to overcome such interference. Standard protocols required reporting unauthorized personnel during extreme weather conditions, but the circumstances made such reporting potentially dangerous for the beings now under her protection. Decision made, Maya moved to the emergency equipment locker and retrieved the station's long-range signal amplifier, a device designed to boost emergency transmissions during severe weather conditions. With careful adjustments, she reconfigured the equipment to broadcast interference across multiple frequencies simultaneously, creating electronic noise that would disrupt most scanning technologies while appearing as natural storm-generated distortion rather than deliberate countermeasures. "This should be less obvious than yesterday's approach," she explained to the shepherd, who watched her preparations with evident attention. "They'll detect the interference, but may attribute it to storm conditions rather than deliberate jamming." Maya activated the modified device, then returned to observation. For several minutes, the searchers continued their methodical pattern, periodically consulting their equipment and adjusting course. Then their behavior changed. repeated equipment checks, evident communication between team members, and finally a change in formation suggesting strategic reassessment. After several failed attempts to establish reliable readings, they finally turned and began moving away from the station back toward the wilderness boundary. Maya maintained observation until the figures disappeared completely into the swirling snow. The shepherd remained alert throughout, tracking Maya's movements, while maintaining protective proximity to her puppies. Only when Maya finally stepped away from the window did the dog's posture relax slightly, though her baseline vigilance remained elevated compared to normal canine behavior. "That buys us time, but they're escalating their approach," Maya said, returning to kneel near the dog. "Multiple operators, improved equipment, coordinated tactics. They want you back very badly." The shepherd met her gaze with that unsettling intelligence, communicating understanding beyond species limitations. Maya found the quality of this silent exchange increasingly remarkable, an interaction that transcended normal human-animal dynamics to approach genuine communication between sentient beings. "We need to understand more about what we're facing," Maya continued, moving toward her workstation. "The implant behind your ear might contain critical information, but removing it requires preparation and carries risks." Maya returned to her research, now focused on understanding the specific technology likely used in the implants. Several technical papers referenced experimental neural interface systems designed for military working animals, utilizing miniaturized components for monitoring physiological data, tracking location, and potentially influencing behavior through targeted stimulus. The most advanced systems mentioned cognitive mapping capabilities and performance optimization protocols without specific technical details, terminology suggesting capabilities beyond standard monitoring toward potential cognitive control or enhancement. As noon approached, Maya turned her attention to practical preparations. The information she had gathered suggested that whatever program had created K9S7 represented significant investment in both technological and biological research, operating outside standard ethical oversight. The aggressive pursuit, despite extreme conditions, indicated high-value asset recovery rather than animal welfare concerns, consistent with property retrieval rather than living being considerations. Given these assessments, passive waiting for official contact no longer represented a viable strategy. The reduced timeline until storm clearance, the escalating unauthorized search attempts, and the priority classification of the retrieval operation all pointed toward high-risk confrontation once isolation ended. More proactive measures were required. Maya began assembling equipment for examining the implant behind the shepherd's ear. The station's emergency veterinary kit contained basic surgical instruments, not ideal for precision extraction, but potentially adequate with proper preparation. The electronic diagnostic equipment used for station systems maintenance could be modified to analyze signal patterns and data architecture if the implant could be safely removed and accessed. The shepherd observed these preparations with remarkable awareness, her attention following Maya's movements with evident comprehension beyond instinctive curiosity. When Maya approached with the modified scanning device, the dog adjusted position without prompting, tilting her head to provide better access to the implant site behind her left ear, a cooperation suggesting understanding of purpose rather than merely tolerating human activity. "I need to scan the implant before attempting removal," Maya explained, maintaining the verbal communication that seemed to resonate with the dog's comprehension abilities. "This won't hurt, but it might create some unusual sensations." The scanner activated with a soft hum, analyzing the electronic signature emanating from beneath the shepherd's skin. Data appeared on the connected display, transmission frequencies, power consumption patterns, and most significantly, periodic data packet transmissions on military-reserved bandwidth. The implant wasn't merely a passive tracking device, but an active transmission system, regularly sending information to receiving stations when within range. "It's broadcasting," Maya murmured, studying the data patterns. "Not just location, but comprehensive data packages, likely including physiological monitoring, positional tracking, and possibly cognitive metrics." The implications were significant. The sophisticated transmission system explained the aggressive pursuit despite extreme conditions. The Shepherd represented not just valuable property, but an active data source, providing information about whatever program had created her. Her escape threatened not just asset loss, but potential exposure of classified operations if the implant data could be accessed and decoded. More concerning was the possibility of receiver functionality alongside transmission capabilities. Advanced systems referenced in the technical literature mentioned bidirectional communication, the ability not just to monitor subjects, but potentially to influence behavior through targeted stimulus. If the implant incorporated such technology, it represented not just surveillance, but potential control mechanisms. "This complicates removal," Maya explained, shutting down the scanner. "The system is more sophisticated than I anticipated. Extraction without proper equipment carries significant risks." The Shepherd maintained that steady gaze, communicating understanding beyond verbal comprehension. After a moment's consideration, she deliberately shifted position, pressing her head against Maya's hand in what appeared to be explicit permission despite potential risks. Trust extended through action rather than language. Maya felt the weight of this responsibility acutely. The dog had sought specific sanctuary, navigating lethal conditions to reach her station while protecting vulnerable offspring. She had demonstrated extraordinary intelligence, remarkable communication abilities, and deliberate trust extension despite evidence of previous mistreatment by humans. These qualities created ethical obligations beyond standard animal welfare considerations, approaching the responsibilities owed to beings capable of choice, comprehension, and consent. Before Maya could make final decisions regarding the implant, the scheduled midday radio check-in activated. "Blackridge, this is Central. Status update required, over." Maya responded with practiced professionalism despite her internal tension. "Central," Blackridge confirming. "Station conditions stable, all systems functional. Storm maintaining Category 5 parameters with momentary intensity fluctuations. Over." "Roger." Blackridge, be advised, satellite monitoring indicates unauthorized signal activity in your sector approximately 1 hour ago. Military Liaison Office reports potential security breach involving classified technology. Implement Security Protocol Delta 7 immediately. Confirm acknowledgement. The specific protocol designation sent a chill through Maya. Delta 7, a procedure specifically designed for technology-compromised scenarios, requiring immediate electronic isolation of the station and preparation for priority extraction of affected personnel and equipment. The designation matched too closely with the Shepherd's K9S7 classification to be coincidental, suggesting specific protocols designed for this exact scenario. Acknowledge, Central. Implementing Delta 7 protocols effective immediately. Will report completion of isolation procedures within standard time frame. Blackridge out. The transmission ended, leaving Maya with confirmation of her growing concern. The unauthorized signal activity undoubtedly referred to the Shepherd's implant transmissions, detected despite the interference measures she had implemented. The classification as security breach involving classified technology, rather than Missing military working dog confirmed the priority nature of the retrieval operation. This wasn't standard animal recovery, but classified technology protection. The shepherd had been listening with that focused attention, body tensing at the protocol designation in apparent recognition. Her reaction confirmed Maya's suspicion that Delta 7 directly related to her designation as K9S7, suggesting the protocol had been specifically designed for scenarios involving her potential escape or compromise. Maya turned to the dog, abandoning pretense of normal animal-human dynamics. They know you're here. They've implemented specific protocols for your retrieval. The designation matches your identification too exactly for coincidence. The shepherd's response transcended normal canine behavior, a deliberate shift in posture, communicating not just understanding, but decision-making. She moved to her puppies, nosing them gently, then returned to Maya with clear intentionality in her movements. She positioned herself directly in front of Maya, then deliberately lowered herself to a lying position, exposing the implant site. Behind her ear, in unmistakable communication, "You want me to remove it," Maya said quietly, recognizing the deliberate choice being expressed. Despite the risks, the dog maintained steady eye contact, communication beyond language but perfectly clear nonetheless. Maya nodded, accepting both the request and the responsibility it entailed. "I'll prepare properly," she promised. "We have limited time before they can reach us." Maya moved with focused efficiency, gathering necessary equipment and modifying available tools for the delicate procedure. The station's emergency veterinary kit contained local anesthetic, basic surgical instruments, and antibiotic treatments. The electronics maintenance equipment provided precision tools adaptable for the extraction. Most importantly, the electronic interference system could be reconfigured to block any emergency transmission the implant might attempt during removal, a critical precaution given its sophisticated capabilities. As Maya prepared, she maintained verbal communication with the shepherd, explaining each step and anticipated challenges. The dog watched these preparations with remarkable comprehension, adjusting position without prompting to provide optimal access to the implant site while maintaining visual contact with her puppies. This cooperation transcended trained compliance, demonstrating understanding of purpose and conscious choice to participate despite potential discomfort. "The local anesthetic will numb the area," Maya explained, preparing the injection. "You'll feel pressure, but not pain during the procedure." The shepherd remained perfectly still as Maya administered the anesthetic, not flinching despite the needle's intrusion. Further evidence of extraordinary self-control and deliberate cooperation. After confirming the medication had taken effect, Maya began the careful process of accessing the implant, making a precise incision along the existing scar line to minimize additional tissue damage. The device revealed beneath the skin was more sophisticated than anticipated, approximately the size of a grain of rice, but containing multiple components visible even to unaided examination. Microscopic filaments extended from the main unit into surrounding tissue, suggesting neural interface capabilities beyond simple tracking or monitoring. The construction indicated military-grade technology, with protective casing designed to prevent tampering or environmental damage. With extreme care, Maya utilized the modified precision tools to detach the filaments from surrounding tissue, employing techniques adapted from electronics micro-repair rather than standard veterinary procedures. The shepherd remained motionless throughout, maintaining remarkable stability despite what must have been unusual sensations as the device was carefully separated from its biological integration. After nearly 40 minutes of painstaking work, Maya finally extracted the complete implant with its filament system intact. She immediately placed it in a specialized container designed to block electronic transmissions, preventing any emergency activation or data broadcast during examination. After cleaning and closing the small incision site, she administered antibiotics to prevent infection and carefully checked the shepherd's vital signs. "You did extraordinarily well," Maya said, genuine admiration in her voice. "Most humans couldn't maintain that level of cooperation during such a procedure." The dog responded with a gentle pressure of her muzzle against Maya's hand, a gesture of connection rather than merely seeking attention or reassurance. She then returned to her puppies, checking them thoroughly before settling beside them with notably reduced tension in her posture. The implant removal appeared to have created immediate psychological relief beyond the physical extraction, suggesting the device's presence had maintained constant stress regardless of activation status. Maya turned her attention to examining the extracted technology, utilizing the station's equipment to analyze its components and functions without triggering activation. The construction confirmed her assessment of military-grade technology, with multiple systems integrated into the miniaturized package. Location tracking, physiological monitoring, data transmission, and most disturbingly, neural interface capabilities. With apparent bidirectional functionality, the neural filaments contained microscopic electrode arrays designed for both monitoring brain activity and delivering targeted stimuli to specific neural structures, technology theoretically capable of not just observing but influencing thought processes, emotional states, and potentially behavior. The sophistication exceeded publicly acknowledged capabilities by at least a decade, representing classified development far beyond standard military applications. Most significantly, the device contained substantial onboard memory, storage, capacity designed for data accumulation between transmission opportunities. This component might hold critical information about the program that had created K9S7, operational parameters, responsible personnel, and potentially evidence of ethical violations that would not withstand public or regulatory scrutiny. Accessing this data required specialized equipment beyond what was available at the ranger station. The device utilized proprietary interfaces and encryption, preventing standard access methods. However, the station's satellite uplink system, designed for emergency communications when standard channels failed, could potentially be modified to transmit the device's electronic signature and visible architecture to contacts who might assist with remote analysis. As Maya considered these possibilities, the radio activated with an unscheduled transmission, a significant deviation from standard protocols, suggesting elevated concern at Central Dispatch. Blackridge, this is Director Harmon. Respond immediately, over. The direct contact from regional leadership rather than standard dispatch personnel indicated serious developments. Maya responded with careful neutrality. Director Harmon, this is Ranger Collins at Blackridge. Receiving you clearly, over. Collins, satellite monitoring indicates you have not implemented complete electronic isolation as required by Delta 7 protocols. Explain this deviation immediately. Maya maintained professional composure, despite the confrontational tone. Sir, isolation procedures in progress, but modified due to storm interference with standard implementation. Critical station systems require maintained functionality during extreme weather conditions. Safety protocols taking precedence as outlined in Ranger Operations Manual Section 4. 3. Paragraph 7. The reference to specific manual guidelines, which did indeed prioritize station operational integrity during extreme conditions, created bureaucratic cover for her actual activities. The citation would require verification before being challenged, Buying critical time. Understood, Collins. However, this situation involves national security considerations beyond standard procedures. Military liaison personnel report critical. Technology potentially compromised in your sector. You are hereby ordered to implement complete communication blackout, except for scheduled check-ins until retrieval team arrives. Acknowledge. Acknowledge, Director. Will implement modified blackout protocols, effective immediately while maintaining critical safety systems. Blackridge out. Maya ended the transmission, then immediately disabled the standard communication systems, while maintaining the satellite uplink through shielded connections, technically violating the blackout order, but creating plausible deniability through apparent compliance. The confrontational nature of the Director's communication and the national security classification confirmed the high-priority status of the retrieval operation. The shepherd had been listening with evident comprehension, body language communicating, understanding of the increased threat implied by leadership intervention. Her attention remained divided between her puppies and Maya's activities, maintaining protective vigilance while monitoring developments with remarkable awareness. "They're escalating official channels now," Maya explained, continuing the practice of direct communication. The implant removal triggered recognition of compromise. They'll be preparing specialized teams for immediate deployment once weather permits approach. The compressed timeline created urgent necessity for action beyond passive waiting. Maya returned to examining the extracted implant, utilizing available diagnostic equipment to map its architecture without triggering operational functions. The sophistication confirmed her assessment of classified technology far beyond publicly acknowledged capabilities, a device designed not just for monitoring but potential control of enhanced canine subjects. The existence of such technology raised disturbing implications about the program that had created K9S7. Normal military working dog programs operated under established protocols with ethical oversight and regulatory compliance. The sophistication of the implant, combined with the shepherd's extraordinary cognitive capabilities and the evidence of physical mistreatment, suggested operations far outside standard parameters, a program utilizing experimental enhancement, methods without appropriate ethical constraints or accountability. These assessments solidified Maya's commitment to protection beyond temporary sanctuary. The shepherd had demonstrated intelligence approaching sentience, communication abilities transcending normal species limitations, and deliberate choice-making regarding both her own welfare and that of her offspring. These qualities created ethical obligations beyond standard animal considerations, approaching the responsibilities owed to beings capable of comprehension, decision-making, and consent. As afternoon faded toward evening, Maya continued developing contingency plans while monitoring both weather conditions and communications channels. The storm maintained Category 5 intensity but showed the first subtle signs of potential weakening, barometric pressure fluctuations indicating system movement consistent with the revised 48-hour clearance projection. This timeline created definite parameters within which action must occur before isolation protection ended. The shepherd maintained her vigilant guardianship of the puppies while demonstrating increasing comfort with Maya's presence and activities. The removal of the implant appeared to have created significant psychological relief, her behavior showing subtle but meaningful reductions in hypervigilance and stress indicators. She now permitted Maya to approach her offspring without shifting to defensive positioning, acceptance indicating provisional trust extension beyond mere tolerance. This evolving relationship reinforced Maya's growing understanding of the dog's extraordinary nature, Whatever program had created K9S7 had produced capabilities far beyond standard K9 parameters. Cognitive functions approaching human-like comprehension, communication abilities transcending normal species limitations, and decision-making demonstrating complex assessment beyond instinctive response. As Maya prepared the evening meal for both herself and the shepherd, carefully measured to support recovery without overwhelming systems compromised by prolonged malnourishment, she felt a deepening resolve beyond professional obligation or general animal welfare concerns. She had committed to protection of beings who had deliberately sought sanctuary under her care, not through abstract adherence to regulations, but through genuine engagement with their specific vulnerability and extraordinary nature. The storm outside continued its relentless assault, snow accumulation now reaching window level on the northeastern exposure. This weather-enforced isolation provided temporary protection while plans developed and alliance strengthened between species. Whatever came when conditions cleared and direct confrontation became inevitable, Maya had crossed a threshold from which retreat was no longer desirable or possible, committing to protection through active engagement rather than passive observation. In this commitment, Maya recognized reconnection with qualities long suppressed since the rockslide incident: the capacity for moral discernment beyond protocol adherence, the willingness to accept responsibility despite potential consequences, the ability to form connection across boundaries of species and experience. These aspects of herself had once defined her approach to ranger service, before trauma transformed protection into isolation, engagement into withdrawal, purpose into mere existence. The shepherd watched Maya's preparations with that remarkable awareness, amber eyes reflecting intelligence that transcended normal animal limitations. In that steady gaze, Maya recognized something she had been missing during 3 years of self-imposed isolation: the profound connection that comes through acknowledging another being's inherent value and right to protection, regardless of species designation or official classification. As darkness enveloped the wilderness outside, two beings from different species but sharing experience of trauma and isolation continued their unlikely alliance against forces that viewed one as property and the other as obstacle. The storm maintained its protective barrier for now, but preparations continued for inevitable confrontation when weather cleared and direct intervention became possible. In that preparation, seeds of transformation continued growing. Reconnection with purpose, engagement with responsibility, and commitment to protection of those who could not protect themselves. The storm's intensity began to wane slightly around midnight, wind speeds decreasing from catastrophic to merely severe. Snow continued falling heavily, but the distinctive howling that had provided constant audio backdrop for the past 2 days diminished to a more subdued moan. Maya recognized these subtle shifts from years of wilderness weather monitoring, the first indicators of the system's gradual movement eastward, consistent with the projected 48-hour clearance timeline. Inside the ranger station, the shepherd slept in true rest for the first time since her arrival. Not the vigilant half-sleep of hyper-alert watchfulness, but genuine restorative slumber, her body finally yielding to exhaustion now that the implant's constant presence had been removed. She maintained protective proximity to her puppies, but her posture had softened, muscles relaxed rather than tensed for immediate response to perceived threats. Maya used this period of relative calm to continue, analyzing the extracted implant without risking activation. The station's diagnostic equipment revealed increasingly disturbing aspects of the technology: neural interface capabilities far beyond publicly acknowledged development, monitoring systems designed to track physiological responses with extraordinary precision, and most concerning, stimulus delivery mechanisms targeted at specific brain regions associated with motivation, fear response, and decision-making. The implications were profoundly troubling. This wasn't merely a tracking device, but a comprehensive monitoring and potential control system. Technology designed not just to locate and observe, but potentially to influence behavior through targeted neural stimulation. Such capabilities represented significant ethical concerns, even when applied to standard service animals. When combined with a subject demonstrating K9S7's extraordinary cognitive capabilities, they approached violations of fundamental principles regarding autonomy and consent. Most significantly, the device's sophisticated onboard memory suggested data storage beyond simple operational parameters. The capacity indicated comprehensive recording capabilities, potentially storing information about the program that had created the Shepherd, operational protocols, responsible personnel, and critically, evidence of methods that would not withstand regulatory scrutiny or public exposure. Maya carefully connected the implant to a modified data transfer system, utilizing the station's satellite uplink equipment to transmit the device's electronic signature to a secure server maintained by a former colleague now working in cybersecurity. Ethics. The message accompanying this data was deliberately vague, but contained coded references that would identify both sender and the sensitive nature of the information without explicitly stating details that might trigger automated monitoring systems. With this critical task completed, Maya turned her attention to more immediate preparations. The weather shift suggested the 48-hour projection for storm clearance remained accurate, creating definite parameters for planning. Once conditions permitted approach to the station, both official retrieval teams and potentially unauthorized operators would attempt to recover the Shepherd and her puppies. Effective countermeasures required understanding their likely approaches and developing appropriate responses. Maya accessed the station's emergency contingency documentation, reviewing protocols for situations involving conflicting jurisdictional claims. As federal wildland, the National Forest fell under Park Service Authority, but numerous exceptions existed for national security considerations, wildlife management, and environmental research. These exceptions created potential for jurisdictional confusion during operations involving multiple agencies, confusion that might be strategically utilized. The Delta 7 protocol designation suggested specific procedures developed for scenarios involving K9S7's potential escape or compromise. The explicit matching between protocol name and the dog's designation indicated preparation for precisely this situation. Recovery of valuable assets considered federal property rather than living beings deserving humane treatment. This classification provided both challenge and opportunity in developing effective protection strategies. As dawn approached, Maya completed a comprehensive assessment of available resources and potential approaches. The station's emergency equipment included specialized wilderness survival gear, portable communication systems, and medical supplies designed for extended field operations. The facility's design incorporated multiple access routes and secure storage areas not immediately apparent to those unfamiliar with ranger station architecture. Most significantly, Maya's comprehensive knowledge of the surrounding wilderness created advantages in navigation and strategic positioning that external operators would not share. The Shepherd awakened as first light penetrated the snow-covered windows, her transition to consciousness demonstrating the same remarkable awareness that characterized all her behaviors. Rather than the gradual reorientation typical of canines, she moved from sleep to complete alertness instantly, immediately checking her puppies before scanning the environment for changes during her rest period. Once satisfied with this assessment, she acknowledged Maya's presence with direct eye contact that conveyed recognition beyond mere awareness. "The storm is beginning to weaken," Maya explained, maintaining the practice of verbal communication that seemed to resonate with the dog's comprehension abilities. We have approximately 36 hours before conditions permit approach to the station. We need to prepare for what happens when isolation ends. The shepherd's response transcended normal canine behavior, a shift in posture and attention, quality that suggested active processing rather than simple reaction to human communication. She rose and moved deliberately to the station windows, scanning the exterior conditions with assessment rather than mere curiosity, then returned to position herself near Maya with clear expectation of continued information exchange. This behavioral pattern reinforced Maya's evolving understanding of the dog's extraordinary nature. Whatever program had created K9S7 had produced capabilities far beyond standard canine parameters, cognitive functions approaching human-like, comprehension, communication abilities transcending normal species limitations, and decision-making, demonstrating complex assessment beyond instinctive response. "I've sent the implant data to someone who might help analyze its contents," Maya continued, responding to the shepherd's evident expectation of information sharing. "If the device contains evidence of the program that created you, it might provide leverage against those seeking to retrieve you." The scheduled morning radio check-in approached, each communication now carrying additional significance given the escalating situation. The shepherd positioned herself where she could monitor both Maya and the communications equipment while maintaining proximity to her puppies, demonstrating the same focused attention that characterized her response to all transmissions. "Blackridge, this is Central. Status update required. Over." Central, Blackridge confirming. Station secure, all systems functional. Weather parameters showing initial reduction in wind velocity consistent with projected system movement. Modified. Electronic isolation protocols maintained per Director Harmon's instructions. Over. Roger, Blackridge. Be advised, specialized personnel have been assigned for your sector following storm clearance. Their authority supersedes standard park service protocols. Under National Security Directive 17B, you are instructed to provide full cooperation and complete access to station facilities upon their arrival. Acknowledge. The citation of specific national security directives represented significant escalation. Frameworks designed for terrorism response or military necessity being applied to what was ostensibly animal recovery. This classification confirmed Maya's assessment of the high-priority nature of the operation and the classification of the shepherd as valuable property rather than living being. Acknowledged, Central. Will comply with authorized personnel upon storm clearance. Blackridge out. The transmission ended, leaving Maya to process the implications of this development. The invocation of National Security Directive 17B created jurisdictional authority transcending normal park service operations, effectively militarizing what would otherwise be administrative retrieval. This approach suggested both the value placed on recovering the shepherd and concern regarding potential exposure of the program that had created her. The dog had been listening with that focused attention, body tensing at the mention of specialized personnel in apparent recognition of the increased threat. Her reaction confirmed Maya's growing understanding of the shepherd's comprehension abilities. Recognition not just of tones or specific trigger words, but contextual understanding of communications content. They're sending specialized teams with priority authorization, Maya explained, continuing the practice of direct communication. The national security classification gives them authority beyond standard operations, including potential use of methods normally restricted in civilian contexts. The shepherd maintained eye contact, processing this information with remarkable comprehension. After a moment's apparent consideration, she rose and moved deliberately toward her puppies, nosing them gently, then returned to Maya with clear intentionality. She positioned herself directly beside Maya, body language communicating alliance rather than mere proximity, a statement of cooperative intention rather than simple co-location. This deliberate positioning reinforced Maya's understanding of the dog's extraordinary nature. The shepherd wasn't merely seeking protection or responding to care provided. She was actively participating in strategic consideration, demonstrating awareness of shared purpose and collaborative intention that transcended normal human-animal dynamics. Maya acknowledged this communication with respectful recognition. "We need to prepare for multiple scenarios," she continued, responding to the dog's evident expectation of strategic information sharing. "Once the storm clears, they'll attempt immediate approach by air, likely helicopter given the terrain limitations. The station's designated landing area provides the only viable approach in this sector, which creates both predictability and potential advantage in planning." As Maya outlined potential scenarios and response options, the shepherd maintained that focused attention characteristic of her extraordinary capabilities. Her occasional shifts in posture or gaze direction didn't indicate distraction, but apparent consideration of specific elements being discussed, assessment of options rather than mere listening. The puppies had continued their remarkable recovery, now attempting coordinated movements and responding with increasing vigor to environmental stimuli. The female with distinctive white chest markings demonstrated particular alertness, eyes, now partially open, movements showing surprising coordination for her developmental stage. Her brother remained more vocal, but slightly less physically advanced, demanding attention through increasingly varied sounds rather than independent movement. Their accelerated development reinforced Maya's assessment of genetic significance beyond normal canine parameters. If the shepherd's extraordinary capabilities represented partially heritable traits, her offspring carried valuable genetic material for whoever had created the program. Potentially new generations of enhanced subjects without the conditioning process that had clearly traumatized their mother. This genetic consideration explained the aggressive pursuit despite extreme conditions. Not merely recovery of escaped property, but securing offspring representing significant research investment and future experimental subjects. The puppy's value potentially exceeded even their mothers, creating additional urgency in developing effective protection strategies. As morning progressed, Maya continued preparations while monitoring both weather conditions and communications channels. The storm maintained substantial intensity but showed consistent signs of gradual movement eastward, barometric pressure readings tracking with projections for the 48-hour clearance timeline. This meteorological data established concrete parameters for planning, with approximately 36 hours remaining before conditions would permit approach to the station. Maya's preparations included multiple components addressing immediate, practical concerns and longer-term strategic considerations. Supplies were organized for potential mobility requirements, food, medical necessities, and emergency equipment consolidated for rapid deployment if station evacuation became necessary. Communication systems were prepared for both official interaction and contingency connections outside standard channels. Most significantly, documentation was compiled detailing the shepherd's condition upon arrival, the implant technology extracted, and the extraordinary capabilities demonstrated, evidence establishing ethical concerns that would not withstand public or regulatory scrutiny. The shepherd maintained her remarkable vigilance throughout these preparations, dividing attention between her puppies and Maya's activities with evident comprehension of their significance. Her behavior continued demonstrating capabilities far beyond normal canine parameters, observation reflecting assessment rather than mere attention, cooperation indicating understanding rather than trained compliance, communication suggesting comprehension beyond species limitations. By mid-afternoon, Maya had established comprehensive preparation for multiple scenarios while continuing to monitor the gradually weakening storm. The most likely approach, following weather clearance, involved helicopter insertion of specialized personnel with national security authorization, teams operating under protocols, prioritizing asset recovery over standard ethical considerations. Effective countermeasures required leveraging both Maya's jurisdictional standing within the Park Service and the potential exposure risk of classified programs operating outside appropriate oversight. The scheduled afternoon radio check-in activated, precisely on time, maintaining the rhythm of operational communications despite the extraordinary circumstances developing around the station. Blackridge, this is Central. Status update required. Over. Central, Blackridge confirming. Station. Secure. All systems functional. Weather parameters showing continued reduction in intensity consistent with Eastern System movement. Estimated 36 hours until conditions permit standard operations. Over. Roger, Blackridge. Be advised, Specialized Retrieval Team has established staging position at Eastern Park boundary. Deployment scheduled immediately upon weather clearance. Director Harmon requests direct communication regarding final preparation protocols. Stand by for connection. This development represented significant escalation, staging specialized teams at the park boundary, despite ongoing storm conditions, and arranging direct leadership communication outside standard operational channels. These approaches indicated priority classification beyond normal administrative procedures, consistent with national security parameters rather than standard park operations. After brief transmission static, Director Harmon's voice replaced the standard dispatch operator. Ranger Collins, this is Director Harmon. We have unusual circumstances developing in your sector requiring specialized response protocols. The military personnel arriving after storm clearance are conducting a classified retrieval operation with highest priority authorization. Your cooperation is both expected and required under federal statute. Acknowledge understanding. Maya responded, with careful professional neutrality. Director Harmon, I understand specialized personnel are inbound with priority authorization. Standard cooperation protocols will be implemented upon their arrival. Station facilities are being prepared accordingly. Good. I need to emphasize the sensitive nature of this operation, Collins. The technology they're retrieving represents significant national security investment. You are instructed to report any unusual wildlife encounters or unidentified equipment discovered during the storm period immediately. Particularly any canine species showing unusual characteristics or carrying specialized equipment. Have you observed anything matching this description? The direct question eliminated ambiguity regarding the operation's target, forcing explicit response rather than general acknowledgement. Maya made another decision, reinforcing her commitment to protection of those under her care. Negative, Director. No unusual wildlife encounters during isolation period beyond standard storm behavior patterns. Station perimeter has remained secure throughout the weather event. A pause followed this response, suggesting assessment of its credibility rather than simple acknowledgement. Understood, Collins. Be advised, the personnel arriving at your station will conduct comprehensive inspection of all facilities upon arrival. Full cooperation is mandated under National Security Directive 17B. Any obstruction or withholding of relevant information constitutes federal violation. Is that clearly understood? Perfectly clear, Director. Will provide appropriate cooperation upon their arrival. Blackridge out. Maya ended the transmission, the explicit threats reinforcing her understanding of the operation's priority classification and the lengths authorized for recovering the shepherd and her puppies. The invocation of specific federal statutes and direct warnings regarding obstruction indicated preparedness to override normal jurisdictional considerations and ethical protocols governing Park Service operations. The shepherd had been listening with that remarkable, focused attention, body language communicating understanding beyond mere reaction to human communication. As the transmission ended, she approached Maya with deliberate intentionality, positioning herself to establish direct eye contact that conveyed recognition of the escalating threat and alliance in response to it. They're staging specialized teams for immediate deployment once the storm clears, Maya explained, responding to the dog's evident expectation of information sharing. The national security classification gives them authority beyond normal operations, including potential immunity from standard ethical oversight. The shepherd maintained that steady gaze, communicating understanding beyond verbal comprehension. After a moment's apparent consideration, she moved deliberately to her puppies, nosing them gently as if conducting assessment, then returned to Maya with clear communication intention. She positioned herself directly beside Maya, body language, expressing cooperative alliance rather than mere proximity, a declaration of mutual purpose and shared objective transcending normal human-animal dynamics. This communication reinforced Maya's evolving understanding of the dog's extraordinary nature. The shepherd wasn't merely seeking protection, but actively participating in strategic assessment, demonstrating awareness of shared purpose and collaborative intention that transcended species limitations. These capabilities created ethical obligations beyond standard animal welfare considerations, approaching the responsibilities owed to beings capable of choice, comprehension, and consent. As afternoon faded toward evening, Maya continued refining preparations while monitoring the gradually weakening storm. The meteorological data confirmed continued system movement eastward, maintaining the projected 48-hour clearance timeline that would permit approach to the station. This concrete parameter established definite boundaries for preparation completion. Before isolation protection ended, Maya's focus shifted toward documentation and evidence preservation, compiling comprehensive records of the shepherd's condition upon arrival, the implant technology extracted, and the extraordinary capabilities demonstrated throughout their interaction. This documentation, combined with the implant data transmitted to her cybersecurity contact, created potential leverage against those seeking to retrieve the dog and her puppies as mere property rather than beings deserving humane treatment. The ethical considerations had evolved beyond simple animal welfare to more profound questions regarding cognitive enhancement and appropriate treatment of beings demonstrating advanced capabilities. If Maya's assessment was accurate, the shepherd represented something approaching sentience despite her non-human origin, a being capable of complex comprehension, deliberate choice, and explicit communication despite species limitations. These qualities created obligations transcending standard legal classifications of animals as property, approaching the ethical considerations owed to beings of recognized personhood. As darkness enveloped the wilderness, Maya completed final preparations for the approaching confrontation while the shepherd maintained her vigilant protection of the puppies. The storm continued its gradual weakening, isolation protection diminishing with each passing hour as conditions improved toward operational parameters that would permit approach to the station. The timeline established concrete boundaries within which final decisions must be made regarding response to the approaching specialized teams. Maya had prepared multiple contingency plans, addressing various potential scenarios, but effective implementation required capabilities beyond what one ranger could provide while protecting vulnerable beings. The jurisdictional complexity created by national security classification necessitated support beyond standard park service channels, connections operating outside the direct authority structures, currently prioritizing asset recovery over ethical considerations. Up next, you've got two more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.